Okay, let's unpack this. We are doing a deep dive today into, well, one of the most radical nutritional strategies out there, the strict carnivore diet. This is a diet that doesn't just cut carbs, it gets rid of everything that isn't from an animal. Fiber, vegetables, nuts, seeds, all of it.
It really is a profound nutritional experiment, and it's gained a massive following, often from people looking for some kind of extreme relief from chronic autoimmune issues or really stubborn metabolic problems.
Right. And you, our listener, you want to cut through all the noise online and just get to the science. What actually happens to your metabolism? How do people not get scurvy? And what's the real story with those often alarming cholesterol numbers we hear about?
That is exactly our mission. We're going to define this paradigm, look at its history a bit, then we'll get into the intense metabolic shift it causes.
And we have to tackle that vitamin C paradox. It's fascinating. Plus, the big one, the cardiovascular controversy, specifically that lean mass hyperresponder phenomenon.
Yeah. And finally, the practical side. What's it actually like to adapt to this? So let's start with the basics. The strict carnivore diet, by definition, it's the exclusive consumption of animal source foods. Meat, organs, seafood, eggs, maybe some dairy.
And what's so interesting is that while it feels like this very modern internet-driven thing, our sources show it has roots going way back, like 19th century back.
Exactly. You had practitioners like Arnaldo Cantani and James Salisbury prescribing these really meat-heavy regimens, and they were using them for conditions like diabetes and inflammation. So the core idea isn't new at all.
Just newly visible.
And that history helps us see the philosophy behind it, which is all about elimination. To really get it, you have to contrast it with its relatives.
Like the keto diet.
Right.
Yeah.
Keto is all about macronutrient ratios, high fat, low carb, but it still allows for, low starch plants, leafy greens, nuts, things like that.
And paleo, which everyone thinks is just a meat diet, is actually, it's often a high volume vegetable and fruit diet. It's just framed as pre-agricultural.
The carnivore diet is totally different. Its logic is the absolute elimination of plant compounds. Proponents argue that plants have these secondary metabolites, lectins, oxalates, phytates, that can be harmful, and they want them gone completely.
And that drive for elimination gets taken to its absolute extreme with something called the lion diet. What does that even look like?
It's extreme elimination. That's the whole point. You are eating only ruminant meat, so beef, lamb, bison plus salt and water. That's it.
Wow.
And that's usually a tool for people with very severe complex autoimmune conditions. It's an attempt to reduce dietary complexity to the absolute minimum to find triggers.
Okay, so the philosophy is elimination. Once you take away all that external glucose, all the carbs, what is this profound metabolic reorganization that happens?
It's an engine shift. First, the body burns through its quick-access sugar reserves, which is glycogen in your liver and muscles. That takes somewhere between 24 and 72 hours.
And once that's gone, the body has to flip a switch.
A big switch. It moves into lipolysis, which is just the breakdown of stored body fat. Free fatty acids are released, and the liver converts a bunch of those into ketone bodies, primarily one called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB.
And BHB is the key here. You said it has a dual role. It's not just fuel.
This is where it gets really fascinating. Yes, it's a super efficient fuel for the brain and the heart, but our sources really highlight its other job as a powerful signaling molecule. Specifically, it actively suppresses something called the NLRP3 inflammasome.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. The NLRP3 inflammasome. Break that down for us. What is that?
Think of it like your body's central fire alarm. It's a protein complex in your immune cells that detects danger signals, pathogens, cell damage, metabolic waste. And when it's triggered, it drives intense systemic inflammation.
So if BHB suppresses it.
You're essentially turning down the volume on that fire alarm, which is likely why so many people report these dramatic reductions in pain and inflammatory conditions.
That makes the mechanism much clearer. But what about the cells that still need glucose? Like red blood cells. How does the body handle that with zero sugar coming in?
It makes its own. It's a process called gluconeogenesis. The liver, and to some extent the kidneys, they just synthesize the glucose they need from other things, mostly from glycerol, which comes from fat breakdown, and certain amino acids from protein. It's a demand-driven system.
And because the body is making its own glucose and running on fat, that's why we see such dramatic clinical results for metabolic problems.
Precisely. For someone with metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes, you eliminate those huge post-meal glucose spikes. Insulin demand plummets. And it can be a very, very fast path to resolving insulin resistance and seeing huge drops in HbA1c.
That sounds incredibly powerful. But here's the red flag for me, and I'm sure for a lot of listeners. If the diet is, say, 20 to 40% protein. Doesn't that put a massive strain on the kidneys?
That is the crucial caution point, no question. With high protein intake, the liver has to process a significant load of nitrogen waste through the urea cycle. For a healthy person, this is generally manageable. But if you have any pre-existing renal insufficiency, this is something that absolutely requires medical supervision. You do not want to overload a system that's already struggling.
Vital context. Okay, let's shift to the biggest, most common criticism of this diet. Nutritional adequacy. Conventional wisdom just screams deficiency, right? Especially vitamin C.
It does. And the primary counterargument comes down to two things: nutrient density and bioavailability. Animal sources are packed with nutrients, but just as important, those nutrients are in a form your body can easily absorb.
Like with iron and zinc.
Exactly. The heme iron and the zinc you get from red meat are absorbed at a much, much higher rate than the non-heme versions in plants. In plants, they're often bound up by things called anti-nutrients like phytic acid that block absorption.
So you need to eat less, quantitatively, because you're absorbing so much more of what you do eat. And our sources point to case studies where people are easily meeting or even exceeding the reference values for B12, vitamin A, zinc, selenium.
And this is a big, but muscle meat alone is not enough. You have to adopt a nose-to-tail philosophy. If you just eat steak, you can definitely run into shortfalls of thiamine, magnesium, even calcium.
This is where organ meats come in.
Yes. This is why proponents are always talking about eating liver, which they call nature's multivitamin. It's packed with folate, fat-soluble vitamins, and things like vitamin K2, which you can also get from grass-fed butter or bone marrow.
Okay, let's get to the most perplexing piece of this. Vitamin C. We're all taught we need a lot of it every day to prevent scurvy. So why is clinical scurvy basically unheard of in long-term carnivores?
This is explained by a really interesting concept called the glucose ascorbate antagonism theory, or GAA. The core idea is that glucose, which is sugar, and vitamin C ascorbate are so chemically similar that they compete to get into your cells. They use the same doorway, basically a transporter called GLUT4.
So give us an analogy for that. How should we picture that competition?
Imagine the GLUT4 transporter is a revolving door into a building. On a high-carb diet, your bloodstream is flooded with glucose molecules all trying to get through that door. Vitamin C has to fight for a spot. You need a huge crowd of vitamin C molecules just to get a few inside.
But if you remove that flood of glucose, which the carnivore diet obviously does,
then the revolving door is wide open. The small amounts of vitamin C that are naturally in fresh, rare-cooked meat or organs can just waltz right in. They're transported far more efficiently, which means your overall daily requirement just plummets. It challenges the whole premise of our current recommendations.
that is a fascinating connection. It links your metabolism directly to your micronutrient needs.
Okay, let's move to the second huge controversy. The complete elimination of fiber. We're constantly told we need, 25 to 38 grams a day for a healthy colon?
And that's a valid concern because removing fiber radically changes the gut ecosystem. On a standard diet, your gut microbes thrive on what's called saccharolytic fermentation. They break down fiber and produce things like butyrate, which is fuel for your colon cells.
So what happens when you starve all those fiber-eating bacteria?
The ecosystem shifts to proteolytic fermentation. Microbes start breaking down undigested protein instead. And this creates different byproducts like ammonia, phenols, and branched-chain fatty acids. The theoretical concern is that too many of these byproducts could increase a marker called zonulin, which is linked to leaky gut.
But here's the massive paradox we saw in the sources. We have all this striking anecdotal evidence of people with severe IBS, IBD, SIBO, and they report total resolution of their symptoms on a zero-fiber diet. How does that work? How can zero fiber fix a gut problem? Well, it suggests that for some people, fiber is the problem, not the solution. The theory is that the diet acts as a kind of therapeutic gut reset. It starves the bacteria that were causing all the fermentation issues, the bloating, the gas, the pain, especially in SIBO, where that fermentation is happening in the wrong place in the small intestine.
So you're just taking away the fuel for the fire.
You're taking away the fuel, exactly. But we have to be clear about the long-term concerns. The traditional link between high red meat intake and colorectal cancer risk is still out there. Same with the concern about reduced microbial diversity over time. We just don't have the long-term data yet.
That's the critical missing piece. Okay, let's pivot to what is probably the scariest part for many people, cardiovascular risk. The standard view is simple. High saturated fat leads to high LDL cholesterol, which leads to heart disease. End of story. But The research is showing a major anomaly here.
Yes, the discovery of the lean mass hyperresponder, or LMHR phenotype. This is a profile seen specifically in lean, metabolically healthy, insulin-sensitive people who go on a very low-carb diet like carnivore.
And their blood work goes completely haywire.
It does, but in a very specific pattern, a triad. LDL cholesterol shoots up, often way over 200 milligdl. But at the same time, their HDL, the good cholesterol, is also very high, usually over 80. And their triglycerides, a key marker for metabolic problems, are incredibly low, like under 70.
So why are these super healthy people walking around with LDL numbers that would make most doctors reach for a prescription pad immediately?
The lipid energy model gives us a powerful hypothesis. It suggests that in these people, the high LDL isn't a sign of pathology. It's a sign of fuel trafficking. Their bodies are so good at burning fat that they need a massive fleet of LDL particles just to transport all that energy around.
So it's not a traffic jam, it's just a very busy highway.
That's a great way to put it. And the K-series data is shocking. Many of these LMHRs had a coronary plaque score of 0, despite having LDL levels over 500.
And to really illustrate how this system works, you have to talk about that crossover study by Dr. Nick Norwitz, the Oreo experiment.
The Oreo experiment. It's unforgettable. He took an LMHR subject and simply added 100 grams of carbs a day in the form of Oreos to their diet.
So what happened?
The subject's LDL cholesterol plummeted. It went from 384 mdl down to 111 in just 16 days. That's a 71% reduction. For context, high-intensity statin therapy in that same person had previously only achieved a 32.5% reduction.
That is it's unbelievable. It suggests that LDL, in the specific context, is a functional marker of fuel flow, not a fixed risk factor.
It fundamentally challenges the traditional view that high LDL is always bad no matter what. But, and we have to be impartial here, while the data is provocative, we still need long-term outcome data. We need to see what happens over decades.
Absolutely. Okay, let's finish with the practical reality, the adaptation phase. It does not sound easy.
No, it's often called the carnivore flu. It can last 2 to 4 weeks. The mechanism is basically a rapid flush of water and minerals. As your insulin drops, your kidneys start excreting a lot of sodium.
And natriuresis of fasting.
That's one. And essential minerals like magnesium and potassium go out with it.
And the symptoms sound awful. Fatigue, headaches, muscle cramps, heart palpitations.
Management requires being really aggressive with electrolytes. You have to use a lot of salt and supplement with magnesium and potassium. And the other big mistake is eating too lean. You have to really increase the fat to protein ratio to avoid nausea and get enough energy.
And on the sourcing side, the conversation is really shifting toward quality, this idea of carnivore traditionalism, right? Regeneratively sourced, grass-fed meat.
Absolutely. And there are real nutritional differences. Grass-fed beef can have up to 5 times more omega-3s and more conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. It links the dietary choice to environmental stewardship and nutrient density.
So if we synthesize everything, the carnivore diet is clearly a powerful, radical tool.
It is. The sources show it can be a highly effective short to medium-term elimination protocol for people with severe metabolic and autoimmune disorders. The reported success rates are really high.
But those long-term questions remain. The chronic high LDL, the potential for kidney stones, and the long-term picture for colorectal health without fiber.
Right. And the emergence of the LMHR phenotype really suggests our current nutritional models are incomplete, that a risk factor like LDL isn't the same in every metabolic context.
So what's the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to keep in mind as this science evolves?
The data we're all waiting for is the long-term imaging data. We need to see inside the arteries.
The future of this diet, whether it's a sustainable lifestyle or a specialized therapeutic tool, will be decided by studies looking at coronary artery calcium, CAC scores, and gut barrier markers in long-term carnivore cohorts. Those are the numbers that will tell us the true trade-off.
The deep dive continues.
Indeed. We've reached the end of this deep dive.